All right, everyone, if you can hear me, will you type the letter X into the chat for me, please? That helps. I do this a lot when I'm working with my virtual students. That helps with check-in. It also helps me see when you guys can hear me. So there's two parts to whenever you're checking in for understanding with our students. There's one that they need process time, and number two, we call it broadband time, because there oftentimes is a delay or a pause or a disconnect a little bit sometimes when we're giving those instructions or asking for understanding. So our wait time feels longer when we're in a digital platform, and we will all be embracing the dead air, because when you have wait time in a digital setting, it is much quieter than what you see in the classroom setting. So I'm going to share my screen. I just want to front load this. I made a PowerPoint presentation to give you an example of how you could set up a lesson or time. This is just an example to see format. Just know you guys are educators and you have best practices and you know what your students need and you know how to augment them. So even though on the slide I'm giving a writing example, perhaps your speech therapist and you want them to work on vowel sounds. That all can be translated. This is my visual, just like when you sat next to your student and you gave them their worksheet, that's their sample. We're just doing it in a digital way. Let's get started, and know that this PowerPoint slide will be attached with the recording of me made available. I put it in a beautiful PDF for you. So this is teaching. So let's get started. So we want to set the tone. Setting the tone's very important because we want to make sure that we're giving them the expectations of what they want and how to act, whether it's a live session or just interacting with their work. This gives them a sense of structure and normalcy when we are in a circumstance that is not normal or predictable. Setting consistent ground rules so they're very clear for the students, just like you have classroom expectations. Be sure to make a sheet for how to use tools if you are having them interact in a Zoom, Blackboard, Adobe Connect, WebEx, and I could go on and whatever the platform that your district is allowing you to use, Google Meet, Hangout, that kind of thing. Because if your parents and guardians are supporting those students, it's really vital for them to have those tools as quick sheets so they can reference, as many of our families and our teachers and ourselves are not accustomed to working in a virtual world. Screenshots are the quickest way. So if you have snippet tools on your computer, if you Google snippet, you can download. Many programs have this for free. This is essentially a more controlled copy and paste. My third expectation is for you guys to, when you are giving those sessions, things are the same, right? When they walk into their classroom, things are the same. They know where your desk is. They know where their desk is. They know where the whiteboard is. That's the same thing here. It translates into, if you're using PowerPoint, if you're using Google Slides, I suggest using the same setup so that way they can have that piece. Also, how you structure that time, just like when they're in the classroom with you, whether you're a speech pathologist, if it's their ELD pullout, if it's their resource pullout, what have you, that's extremely helpful. Let me show you what those ground rule expectations could look like. I have two different slides. There's 4 different options with that. Here's some. On the left, we have a cork board with all the expectations that we have for students. On the left is something more simplistic. So far, the silver lining of the working in this part of the year, although unfortunate that we're not in our classrooms with our students, is that we know our students. So whatever we're using to provide that support is beneficial because we have that here. So here's another set of expectations. You could be as simplistic, or you can, these are
I think you're cutting out, Anna, but I'm going to
different ways you can do this.
I'm going to try to switch to my internet and have you make me host. Sorry, you guys. There's just internet issues at this time of night because a lot more people are online. So we're doing the best we can. Okay, so Anna, so hopefully Anna, talk now. Maybe that's fixed it. I've switched over to my MiFi.
How do I sound now? So if you give me go back to what I was saying, this is examples of expectations that you can put. I've noticed that a large amount of teachers across the state are using Google Classroom. You can have this posted there as well to remind your students, if you are using that as a platform to communicate, so that they have that in multiple places. You can email it out. So when you're giving those session times, when your students are coming, having this as their quick, easy support front loading. Hey, when we're in class, we're going to behave like this. Hey, when we're in class, we walk in like this, is really helpful to bring uniformity and get them turned on to in the mindset of learning. Okay, so I'm going to front load, and then I'm going to give you an example. So when we look at instructions and activities, because we have to be general of what we're doing, right? We have some educational specialists who do a lot of push-in work. We have resource specialists that do pull-out work that directly connects to what the kids are working on in general education. We have pull-outs for ELD. We have pull-outs for speech pathology. What you're asking them to do as best as we can put in a PowerPoint structure, walk through that with them. So you guys have a wealth of resources that you use. Your general ed counterparts are pushing stuff out to students that you guys can augment, that you can break down for them, that you can provide extra resources so that they are getting that quality education in unforeseen circumstances. For you is when you're creating that space, whether it's creating a Google Doc, PDF, a PowerPoint, a slide, whatever you're doing is you're keeping it simple and concise, just like when you break it down for them when they're sitting next to you. You're having clear written and verbal instruction that meets our multiple modalities, and it supports kids who struggle with that reading piece or need both to understand what that expectations are. Give really explicit wait time, using a timer, turning off that mic, letting them process and think before giving answers. Monitoring the responses. Different students are going to have different capabilities of responding, whether it's over the mic, in a chat, on a Google Doc. Be sure that you know your kids. This is not ideal to be in a one fell swoop to be saying, oh, and we're distance learning without, right? Because we're all training, we're all doing this together. The silver lining is we know our students by this point in time, and you know how they respond to you, and you can prompt and support to help them get to arrive in those answers, which is nice because you know where they're capable of and you know what an adequate response is. Following up with the kids, as we all are in these uncertain times, we really need those positive supports. We need those affirmations. We need those follow-ups that can look like in an email, a phone call, posting to Google Classroom some extra supports, perhaps an explicit video on something you want them to do. And giving them that time is really helpful because everybody's in such diverse circumstances. So let me give you an example of a lesson. So this is one that we would use in a digital setting transitioning from winter break. And the reason why I chose it this way is because a lot of you guys have not started with your instructional piece. And so I thought it would be helpful to look at that. I'm giving an example of what could possibly be a skill building class, a goal probing class, an ELD capturing progress class. What I'm showing you is not as important as how the flow of the time is going, because you could do this with manipulatives. You could put or dipographs, right? And you're working with speech pathology and doing speech therapy, and you have those on the board. what the content that you're teaching is specific to your students, is specific to your grade span, is specific to your role. That'll different, but I'm going to give you a format of what it would look like so the student can access it. So here's writing, and we have what's happening. This is front loading on top of what we're already doing, right? We're discussing what we did over break. We're going to talk about transition and linking words. We're going to write a paragraph on a writing prompt. So I'm front loading everything I'm going to talk about with the student, and I'm checking for understanding, and they're saying, yes, we understand. And if they have questions about what we're doing, I can address those there. I'm going over the classroom rules. This is how one could look like: being respectful, be school appropriate, participate, and be awesome. And then the kids would give me a green check mark, a thumbs up, something that says, yes, I agree to behave in this way with our time together. And it just clicks them in, right? These are all steps to get them really engaged. Going over objectives and state standards, because I'm doing a writing, I showed you both. I typically like to write things in I can statements. This can translate to whatever you're asking the child to do or the group to do. I can write using transition words. I can write using transition words to express my thinking. I pulled the state standard. Some of you guys for IEPs often will have that state standard linked with your IEP, depending on district. I'm giving you that option. If you don't use it, don't use it. If you're looking at what any extra supports that you want them to do with their objective, right? You can give here, you can give a visual with it. This is just to set the stage with, this is what we're doing together. This is our goal by the time we finish today. So we do a warm up to get the kids talking. This is making sure we've gone through all the have tos. Now let's make sure they're here so they can share on the mic, they can text in the box, they can write on a whiteboard. That's for we have that capability here in Zoom. Some schools are using Blackboard. Sometimes are using Google Hangout. That extension could be in a Google Doc or some sort of shared, where they're just telling me how that time off was, and kids love doing that. And it gets them ready to go, right? They're using the tools, you know that they're here, and that could be a warm-up. You can do whatever you want, whatever that warm-up is per day, that's totally fine. You could ask them what their favorite, stay-at-home snack is right now. Right now, mine is salt and vinegar chips. I tend to be, when I'm stressed, eat lots of carbs. And so we can have that dialogue, and then they're ready to go. Okay, let's transition now. And we say, let's transition. I typically, with my students, will ask them to take a deep breath in and out. Okay, we're going to do the next thing. So let's learn some stuff. This is the tool. So now I'm teaching them, I'm showing them the tools that I want them to use, or the tools that we've been using over this period of time. These are transition words in the previous lessons and things in their general ed sessions. They've been in their ELD explicit, they've been exposed to those kinds of things. We would walk through these. We would give examples of them. Maybe one of the kids would share out a sentence they know with one of these words in it. But I'm giving them the tools, and I'm going to tell them they're going to see this later. They're going to be using this. So I'm just like if you're passing out the paper of what you want them to do, or you're working with them on what you want, you're saying you have this as a reference. Then I talk about what I want them to do. So here's a writing prompt. Many people make New Year's resolutions. Do you think making these yearly promises to yourself is a good idea or not? Explain your opinion. This can be whatever you want. This is the action. So with those tools that I just gave you, here's what I'm going to ask you to do, and we're going to do that in real time in the session. So this class could be in any, the format doesn't matter, because you would be sharing this with you. You can do that in Google Hangouts as well. It just depends on the platform you're choosing. So I would give them this prompt. I would have them explain, checking for understanding, making sure they know that this makes sense, saying, okay, so now we're ready. So we're going to be writing in paragraph form. What do we do in paragraph form? Going and having the kids tell me, we indent, we capitalize in our first letter, all those pieces. And then I'm going to give them this. This is their action step. In Zoom, in Blackboard, in Adobe Connect, and lots of platforms, they have the option of putting kids in breakout rooms. That means you physically move them into a room, either by themselves or in a small group. You can actually have them have access to this on the board. You could also have them all together. Say you don't want to use the breakout room, right? We haven't gotten through all that training. That seems a little like back and forth and hopping through. That doesn't work. That's fine. You could put this on a Google Doc, have everyone access the Google Docs, have all of them open because you shared copies, and have them work on it real time. You can be calling out, good job. You could be writing comments to them as they're working on it. This is space, so when you're noticing someone's struggling to start, you can talk with them. But if you notice, the reason why I'm showing you in this format is that I'm giving them the express directions, and then I'm giving them the prompt and the supports that they have to utilize. So there's no question. They're not trying to find all the other things, because all of that is in the session itself. Whatever method works well with you is wonderful, because this is we're starting by doing, and we're honing this craft in real time, because we were catapulted into this based on our current circumstances. We're going to fail. Sometimes it's not going to work. Sometimes we're going to have connectivity issues like we just had. But giving them this in a platform, in a space where they can either work on it, you can capture that for progress monitoring. You can also have it extended out so they can see it later, because all of our kids are home and we don't know where they're going to be, right? We don't know if parents are at home, if parents are essential workers, if they are in a daycare setting or what have you. It gives them access as often as they need. And this can be emailed out, this can be shared out, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think I'll just, thanks for that, Anna, because I think it's important to know that in terms of, we have 300,000 CTA members in the state. We have districts, as big as UTLA that are in large urban areas, San Diego, Orange County districts are, more urban areas. But then we also have, rural areas where there's just no access to technology for students and everything is on paper. And even, parents don't even have cell phones, they have satellite phones. So we're trying to be as non-tech specific as possible, just because it's really hard to know what everybody's using, because every district is different. Like I live in the Alvord School District in Riverside County. My oldest two daughters, they're already on Google Classroom, so everything is going to be on Google Classroom when they start teaching this week. My husband teaches in Moreno Valley. I actually don't know what platform they're using. I think they're still trying to figure that out for like people like him who's an art teacher. So, it's kind of all over the board. So I was just trying to think about how would this apply to your situation and like maybe what you're using. And if your district isn't providing software for you and they're making you use free software and it's kind of a free for all, that's a conversation to have with your union, because districts should be consistent, because if you think about it, a parent's got, say 3 kids in the district and they're all using different things. That can be very confusing. So we want districts to be as consistent as possible and to provide the professional development to you. So your district should be providing the PD in terms of like basic skills, how to use that software. And that's really their responsibility. So anyways, just wanted to put that in there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I use PowerPoint because that's what I use. I can make a Google Doc. Lots of people do that. That's absolutely what we're trying to do. And just give you kind of a visualization of what it's going to look like, right? You're in this webinar. If a lot of you guys are using Zoom, because that seems to be, and one of the dominant themes throughout the state, this is what it would look like for your student. If I'm sharing my screen and I'm showing them this is what they're going to see. And that was the method to my madness. So I'm going to keep going, and I promise I'm going to answer lots of questions. So they're going to work on this for a considerable amount of time. If I'm goal programming and they have writing goals, and I have 3 students or 4 students in this at this time, they need good 20 minutes of work time. That means you're still getting on the mic. I love what you guys are working. I really appreciate how hard you are. You can be putting, if you're using Google Docs and you're writing those comments on their document in real time, way to go, smiley face, that kind of thing. That's going to keep them going. It feels unusual to us because we're often in the classroom prompting audibly, right? Way to go, Stephen, you're awesome, that kind of thing, where you're translating, where you're not going to be doing that as much, because they really do need that time to stop and think. I hope that helps. So they're doing this. Then I'm pulling them all in. So if I had them in a break room, I'm going to put them all into the main room. If I have them all in a Google Doc, I'm going to say, okay, everyone come back to me, 1, 2, 3, give me a green check mark. And a smiley face, the number one in the room, or what have you, to do this. And I'm going to say, fantastic job. And we're just going to acknowledge the work that they've done during the time we were together. I put a virtual high five, right? Because we're social distancing, and I think that's super helpful. Yeah. Oh, I have one too. And then this could be a good time to transition them in the next step. So I want to show you what that would look like. I want you to know that there's some diversity in that. Some of you guys are really concerned about assigning extra items. So if you're working with your general ed counterparts, your supports might be breaking down those questions and breaking those lessons into more manageable pieces for your students. Some of it could just be that you just are reinforcing what the gen ed teacher has already assigned. So you're not actually assigning anything yourself. Students that need more time because with our ELD minutes, who need more time because they didn't quite finish whatever the activity is, having them have access later because they have to go watch little brother, someone has to go to the grocery store, the bandwidth died, and we have all those problems. That's really helpful. So, and that would be what that looks like for the takeaways. So like students in the district that I work with use Star 360 as an assessment. They could be working DNF. They could be working on assignments in this slide. You could be giving them the lists, like my daughter's teacher gives her a Google Doc, and the first page is the list of what to do. And you could take that list and then modify it so kids know exactly what to do in the week rather than just getting the assignment of, in this week, complete this. Those are all kinds of things that you can have them do as well. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing.
And I was just thinking of an example. So I taught special education, I taught SDC, I taught resource, and I taught general ed. And I actually did teach classes because that was the way I preferred to give services. But I just wanted to share with you guys just in another example of what Anna, like exactly what Anna's talking about. And I just had thought like, oh yeah, that's just what I was doing. And because I would do things from a distance as well because I was out of the classroom a lot. So this is actually a Padlet that I created, and we were talking about Shogun and Samurai. So if you look right here on the left-hand side, Padlet's a free website. I love it. And you could totally do this real time, and then you could actually like leave it up for maybe a few days and have them add to it. So I'm just going to draw. So here is, if you see, I asked them, what are some key ideas that you learned in class today? So you could maybe like put together, if you're not doing live teaching, you could like put together like maybe it's like a video from like PBS Learning that they're watching. I actually have this whole lesson like of all independent learning for this actually for Shogun and Samurai. And then like maybe they're answering some questions, and then everyone would get on Padlet and maybe and by the way, this was a special ed class, so sorry, I should actually have, no one is in the educational setting anymore, but anyways, but then they answer the questions, and you could either do this live time. I actually taught this when I wasn't in the classroom. So this was an example of kind of distance learning. So I just want to share with you like what Anna's talking about. You can really do it like, this doesn't even have to be live, but you could do it like with things like Padlet, which is a really awesome website. And even on here, like they could actually respond and share resources. So you could even have them doing things like, maybe they're finding like related words. So maybe your students with IEPs are working on like, say, synonyms. So you could have them post related words. So you would give them a website where they would do some research, and then they could post those related words onto this Padlet. And that's also a way for you to check. So it's also formative assessment. So I just wanted to add that because I think it's pretty relevant. So back to you, Anna.
That's perfect. Any way that you're doing these mechanisms is really helpful. And you know your students, so what you're working on helps. I wanted to start highlighting some of the questions. So Christy, we're going to have this attached to, she wants to know if we can have the PowerPoint emailed out to us. Absolutely. It's not going to be done in that format. On the training website, we're going to have that available for you as well. What other questions do you have? Because I really want to give some conservative time for that.
And I can answer Sarah's question. She asks, will you be going over the mod severe classroom distance learning support? Not in this. This is more mild moderate today, and I'm sorry, we should have clarified that. But next week we will on Wednesday and Friday afternoon. And so you can set up, I'm going to type the answer here. But if you go to the cta.org/IPD trainings, we have another virtual educator. She teaches mod severe. She's going to do a repeat, so 2 workshops on Wednesday, 4 o'clock and 5:15. And then next Friday, we have a panel of high school teachers from Westminster and Huntington Beach. It's going to be adult transition, resource, and moderate severe. They're going to talk about how they are actually transitioning to virtual and kind of what's working and what's not.
All right, so questions that you have, please raise your hand. We can have you talk over the mic, Q&A, or even in the chat. We're very happy to answer maybe something more specific or help you troubleshoot something that's happening.
Does anybody want to raise their hand, ask any other questions? I'm just thinking about all the mild, moderate. So a lot of you, let's just ask. I'm just curious who, if you are a general ed teacher, can you type 1 in the chat? We have 82 people on. Sorry for my phone and call-in listeners, but if you're 1, okay, so quite a bit. If you're any kind of special ed, can you type 2? So we have quite a few. And then if you're, and now I'm going to ask just to kind of see if you're elementary general ed, you would, for elementary, you're going to use the number 3. And then if you're gen ed, you'll do a 1. So you'd be 31. If you're special ed elementary, you'd be 32. So just type that in. I'm just curious to see who's elementary here. Just a few elementary special ed. And if you are secondary general ed, let's do 41, and 42 is special ed. Oh, a lot of secondary folks in the afternoon. A lot of special ed. Awesome. So what else do you guys want to see? Because, you know, we both have resources. I mean, what other questions? This is your opportunity right now to ask anything you want, anything you want within reason with the mild, moderate teaching.
Anything you want?
No, but within the mild, moderate teaching, what other questions do you have about distance learning specifically?
Rory asks, I'm a gen ed teacher. How do I work with SPED teacher who pushes in? What are the structures, tips? Okay, so one of the things, especially with our unions bargaining MOUs, right, with how much time and having those considerations of services, one of the things that I think is beneficial outside of working with the district, because some districts are giving very strict guidelines, but sometimes we're running out of day. One of the things I think is so beneficial is collaborating on support specifically geared towards what the gen ed or sped ed, right? So you're a gen ed teacher working with a sped ed teacher and sharing out what you're providing. So if you're asking students to do this sheet, that sped ed teacher who might not have time because they're doing their explicit instruction minutes during the same time, they can break down and provide the support. So that's a more manageable thing for your students. You can do collaboration time where the student can be in the classroom with you. So you guys are co-teachers, like Karen and I are co-hosts. And then when that work time, that special education teacher can pull those kids in a small group with the activity portion, just like that writing prompt, and work with them there. So maybe they're doing that activity together, or that she's giving sentence starters, or we're breaking down and she can have that extension there as well. It very much depends on how much live instructional minutes your districts is doing, but those are options.
And you should also have an MOU on some of these topics. So I just saw, so CTA staff meets every Friday at 1, and we look at like the new MOUs that have been put out in the state. And I saw one today that had limitations, so like no more than an hour a day. It was like a maximum of I think it was 3.5 hours for kindergarten students. It was a maximum live instruction. So it was developmentally appropriate. So I think there needs to be some talk with your union to ensure, because I think it was on the last Zoom webinar, someone brought up, or maybe it was in this one, I'm blending them all together now. But someone had brought up that, you know, by the time a kid has gone through all their general ed classes, which might be 3 hours a day, and then they're working with special ed and OT, now they've been on the computer 6 hours, and that's really not relevant. So I think you should bring that up with your union and talk with the other teachers to figure that out.
And I think it depends on the special ed teacher, right? We know this. If you know these students well and you can help your special ed counterpart to break down those questions with collaboration. Hey, I broke it down for Johnny, Joe, and Susie Q because I think this will help. And then they give feedback. You're collaborating at that point as professionals. And I think that can be really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. And it also depends. So some of your students with IEPs, you're just going to have to agree to do some makeup minutes when normal school resumes. And that's also part of the conversations about working conditions. And you might have to do an addendum, and maybe parents will agree to change services during this pandemic. So.
Yeah, because you can write in that, and with that.
Hope that helps, Rory.
Yeah, that you can do that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Christy Bowling asks, my district is going with not doing live meetings with students. I teach resource 7th, 8th. Oh, cool, I taught that too. I have a large autism population in my 7th grade class. What will be the best way to help transition into this type of learning? I know for me, I used Edmodo, and we have a lot of resources. I'm just gonna share the screen really quickly. And then I'm going to let Anna answer because she also can answer this. So just like this is an example of a census activity I did with my kids. So we were talking about this. I taught also 7th grade social studies. So I had them ask questions and then answer and put it into this Google form. So you could do things like that. I was also just going to show you on our CTA page, on our IPD page, we also have some resources. So if you look here, it's resources for all. I used to do a lot of teaching with Edmodo because I was out of my special ed classroom a lot as a teacher leader in my union. And so I did a lot of like, not distance learning, but I did a lot of instruction through technology with my SDC and RSP students. So if you go to technology, we have some different things on Edmodo and other suggestions. So like I have some websites on literacy. I've got like ways you can do blogging. Blogging's, you could set that up on, you could do that. You could do some journal, like they could do journaling on, I use Weebly. That's the free website. I have directions for setting up an online chat. So my students with autism really, really benefited from online chat, and I found it was a great way for them to communicate. So anyways, we have all these resources to share with you. And then I'm sure Anna, oops, I'm going to mute myself. I'm sure Anna also has some suggestions.
Yeah, so those are all great, having those highly functional. One of my favorite things, because you know how we live in this technology world, and one of the things that I constantly am worried about is giving them free access to things like YouTube, right? Because we have different families or different rabbit holes they can go down. SafeTube, if you Google that, that is a site which takes your, and I'm addressing some of the other considerations like audiobooks that have already been uploaded there, that those links, videos breaking down questions into a safe tube, which means it gets rid of all the ads and it gets rid of their access to be able to access other YouTube clips. So things like you need, what's it called? You need lots of different books on tape because we want to do speech to text. Another one is the Speechify is a free app. It has advertisements on the top, like as a band, but I love it for circumstances just as this, where they were given a packet, they have to read something, they have to read a Google Doc that doesn't necessarily have that capability. If they take a picture of the screen, if they take a picture of the textbook or the literature book, if they take a picture of the poster on the board, it will translate that to speech to text to help with those kinds of things. So I hope that helps. There's tons of different sites right now. So Audible has a specific, if you Google Audible, they have a specific website that's free access to different authors having those digital audiobooks. Storyline is really fantastic because celebrities are doing a lot of, they're doing it in real time, so it keeps updating, where they do that speech to text in literature books, and it actually looks more like reading Rainbow, where they actually see the physical book. ESL, if you Google ESL Reader, there are lots of different chapter books. I don't ever suggest you giving that a family an overall link. For example, Brain Pop or TED Ed or any of those things, those are large scale resources and they have all the things. So if you have a 7th grade student whose maturation level doesn't match their chronological age and is not ready for those health sciences, you don't want them on Brain Pop doing whatever. You want to make sure whatever you're offering is exactly what and only what you want them to access.
Yeah, I think that's good to be specific. Here's another one I just got today. It's called Heifer International, and I saw that they had some books, so you could actually download. And I agree with Anna, like be specific because it's really overwhelming just to see all of these different things. Like here's a song or a book in Spanish and you could download the PDF. So I would, instead of sharing this website, I would just share the actual book.
Right.
Anna's right. It's totally overwhelming for parents.
And you're right. Many, regardless of age span, like currently right now, my 9-year-old, my 4-year-old, and my 10-month-old are in the living room as I'm hiding in my bedroom doing this webinar, that there just isn't all the time. Some things that you can do about embedding. So say you don't want to be on the screen because you're going to do a series of them. You can use Zoom and share your screen on the topic and make a recording that you can then put that link into Google Classroom. You can do that same voice to text. Both Android and Apple products have audio recording, which you can download. You just download it off your phone and then you email it to yourself. So like I'll do it from my private email to my work email and then attach it there as well. Some of the things that we're seeing, especially with our behavior supports, is or OT or PT, some of those, and that's why Karen brought it up about coming back to the table with our IEP teams and talking about how some things, because we are in a global pandemic, can't occur in the same ways that we're doing. I have had with behavior for on task, we're going to translate that not to being on task because we're not in our normal, right, classroom settings and things. I mean, everybody's stressed and scared and frustrated and everything's out of whack, where I would look at it more about task completion. Does that make sense? Meaning, because there's a lot of things our kids can't control. Are they home? Are they home alone? Is their parents working at home? Are they watching younger siblings? Are there older siblings there? Is their parents lost their job as a result of this? Are they with grandma? Are they able to do it when their teachers are providing live sessions? Are they doing it whenever it fits into their life? Those are all things to consider. And so when you're looking at those types of goals, adjust, right? And, making progress. We know that students, for a variety of reasons in their IEP goals in general, or their progression towards exiting out of our English language learner programs, that there's some stalling. The life situation, they're having social emotional circumstances. There's all kinds of different ways. And sometimes we keep or maintain goals, and documenting how they're doing in those positive ways of like, despite the fact that we were in this distance learning and they learned a new platform, Johnny Joe was able to complete with 65 or 75% accuracy, this many different assignments that their gen ed teacher had provided for them. And those kinds of things I think can be really helpful because that way it's still capturing whether they've been to task, but because, right, our doors are closed, there is some issues with how much we can hold, or the fact that we can't hold families or people accountable. I hope that helps.
We have a question here about speech to text. And I was just going to say, and I'm going to answer this too, but their point was that a lot of the textbooks kind of sound like a robot reading. So something I used to do is I would, in PowerPoint, I was actually going to look for it to see if I still have it. But I would actually put stories on, and this was for SDC, but I would put them on a PowerPoint and I would actually record my kids. But you could also record yourself. I don't expect everyone has kids to do that, but you could do it that way. So just record yourself reading it out loud, and that way you're modeling what you'd like. Or maybe work with another teacher to see if they have a student they know who needs practice for that. So that's just a good way to address it.
There's lots and lots of different, like, especially if you start Googling, like, I know that it's ESLBits.net. Let me see if I can find it. They have a lot of those secondary. They don't have everything, but they have ESL. This is for, because this was geared towards English language learners through grade 16. I'm going to put it in the chat. What's nice about it is a lot of those literature books is what we are teaching in the general ed setting, right, to standard. Like, once again, you can actually pull just the one. I like it because it gives the text with the audio. There's 4 different speeds, so that matches both our English language learners that need support as well as our special education population. So that can be really helpful. And those are actual people reading them, just like Audible has, and just like some of those other resources. The nice thing is that a lot of them are new from it as well. And Vicki added read and write for Google Chrome. That's super awesome for that extension.
Yeah, and also I was just going to look to see if Daisy, so like there's the Clearinghouse for Specialized Media and Technology. It's on the CDE website. We have asked our special ed committee to actually look through these resources to see if there's anything useful, and then we'll be posting them on the CTA website. But they do have some specific technology for students with disabilities. So you can go there as well. And I'll copy and paste this into the chat as well.
I know that one of the concerns, because Karen and I are working on a task force with the CDE, specifically on our specialized populations. We're looking at mental health, behavior goals, and things like that, because there wasn't any time to set these things up and kind of working in real time. I know that they're trying to roll it out. What I would do, like making sure you're making those connections and doing, like, Google has survey, things like that. There's gonna, especially, like I said, we're lending ourselves to the fact that we know our students by this point, the school year. You have working relationships with those families, making those contact calls, having the kids do survey when they're in a live session with you, with addressing how that behavior is and documenting it, even if you're not necessarily addressing the goal, because as more guidelines come out, or how your district is deciding to deal with those things, you already have your good practice, like you always do anyways. I mean, it's not like I'm telling you something you don't do. You notice when your kids are unnerved, or you can tell something's up or something's changed at home. And for all of our students, regardless of categorization, they are all a part of this crisis, just like you and I are. And just maintaining that documentation. So if they don't know the answer yet, once you're ready, once they're able to, you can put a narrative next to it with an asterisk saying, you know, and asking with your district on how, or county, because I know some of that's now done by county, on what best practices for that piece is, because that's the hard part, right? Part of the behaviors is that we do all these modifications within the classroom, and that's not possible because they can't be before us, and we can't control that home environment.
Sorry, I was trying to find the unmute button. So that task force we're on, which we're going to be addressing some of those issues. So I'm just going to be honest, not everybody has the answer. Like, we don't have all the answers. CTA doesn't have all the answers. CDE doesn't have all the answers. This is a kind of a unprecedented situation. But we can show you, I was going to look for this website. So the CDE is going to be putting out some webinars every Thursday. And let's see, I think it was sipinclusion.org. Yep. Here it is. So some of these issues we actually are working in small groups to address. So like Anna and I are on the mild moderate group, because that's our specialty area. but we have different specialty areas from around the state working together in small groups. And so they're going to be putting out like one-pagers and videos. Sorry, I've got chaos erupting with my 4-year-old right now. So it's distracting, but they're going to put out webinars and handouts on this page. And then every Thursday at 3:00, there'll be webinars. So hopefully you guys were able to hear that.
And I added that website into our chat so you guys have access to it as well. Because we're doing things in real time. We're doing things with Tandem that even what we have planned, what you and I as individual educators do, what we do in our life, everything's changing all the time. And so we got this. Unfortunately, I wish it could just be like, this is the magic wand and this will fix everything. And that doesn't always happen. And so we're able to be flexible, especially with our exceptional populations as we need to be. That's, you guys' expertise. Your students, your best practices. We all know, like, I just want to give you guys just really encouragement that you guys are doing everything you can to do the very best for your students, despite distance or time, and that them knowing you're there for them is helpful, period, the end, even if you can't be in the ways that they're accustomed to, right? Because they're not in their room before you and things like that. And so doing everything you can, the collaboration is super helpful. We're reaching out to your general ed reaching out to your sped counterparts, working together, because then you guys can make it more manageable, really touching base with your district and your union, making sure that you can have more flexibility, because we're all supposed to get all these minutes in, but you can't be you can't push into a general ed room if you also need to do your supported, what I'm going to call them specialized minutes and things like that, to help and to get more guidance on that. And, sometimes I don't think anyone knows until you bring that up, because those are legitimate concerns and things where we're all looking at what the next steps are. And
yeah, I think this is just a situation where we kind of, we make some plans. So hopefully your union has an MOU and is considering special education. You should really talk to your presidents, because I know not all leaders out there are doing MOUs, but make sure that's included. And you can always write addendums to MOUs. So if you guys have got something in place and then it's not working, hopefully there should be some flexibility to work with your district to change that. So as much as we're kind of physically isolated from each other, on the other hand, we have to be in constant communication with people making decisions so that we can give that feedback to make changes. So it's going to have to be very fluid right now until we figure this out, because the situation is constantly changing. So, and these are really unprecedented times. If you do have something to share that's really working or something you're really proud of, please email us at ipd@cta.org, because that's our department email. And then, we can share that best practice. Someone asked, what is a MOU? That is a memorandum of understanding. So that's added to your union contract. It's like a temporary agreement. Vicki says, I'm doing a virtual learning lab for high school SPED to get one-on-one help. My Google site has a form. Awesome. Vicki, if you want to share that with us via email, we would love to see that. And we also have some teachers next Friday who are going to be talking. They're what we call brick and mortar teachers. So they teach in a regular classroom, and they're taking their adult transition and moderate severe program virtual. So they're going to be sharing what's working, what's not. And just ask us what else you guys want. We're not going to be doing as many basic training like on Zoom or anything like that, because your district should be providing it. And there are some resources out there, but these are kind of those things, just having those conversations, I think it's important. So we still have we can take maybe one more question for Anna before we go. Any other questions for us? Okay, I did get a speech question. So just so you know, on cta.org, and sorry, I'm typing one-handed here because I've got a 1-year-old. I have 5 kids, so I am actually working with 5 kids from 1 to 17, and my 1-year-old just learned how to walk, so that's been interesting working with that. So I'm going to share my screen. So here we go. So if you go to this website, our CTA website, and you go to Leader Resources, you do have to be a member to access this page. But on here, we actually just put out a Q&A on delivering special ed services during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that addresses SLP and psychologist and assessment questions. So I would recommend you go there. And I think that's it. Anything else you want to add, Anna?
I just want to address Marisol's really quick. Offering supports virtually change the language of play services or that is possible. It depends on the minute. You guys, right? You might need to do an addendum. You might need to ask the teacher. There should be, because I know different districts are dealing with it.
Okay, turn it down to 2. You're going to add the ground beef?
That's what we're making sure that happens. So I would adjust that. What I would do is document. Make sure you're taking attendance in those SAI minutes. Make sure or service minutes, right? I would make sure that you have that in place because I don't think people know the answer, but that's the way of dealing with it. If you're not comfortable and you know parents are alarmed, that's what I would do, is I would do an addendum. For this period of time, this is what we're doing to modify, and then just log the time, right? Johnny Joe was here for those 30 minutes this day, and just do it like an attendance sheet, because you might need to make those minutes up. But like I said, I know everyone's working real time, so we're trying to address that as is. Perfect. And then I just want to say, you guys, what an amazing job you all are doing. The fact that you are on a Friday all the way till 6:15, trying to do everything you can to learn more to help your students. We all know that we're so passionate about the kids that we teach and what we're doing, and we care so much about them. And I just want to commend you guys for working so hard. And we appreciate you, and thank you so much for coming.
Yep, thank you. Take care of yourselves. Get some time off away from the screen. Join us next week. So Anna's going to be talking on Monday, and my colleague Lisa Adams will be co-hosting that. She'll be talking about parents and communicating virtually. And then we have an intervention workshop on Tuesday. Wednesday, we're going to be hearing from a teacher in the moderate severe program. And let's see, and then we also have the special ed panel on Friday, and we have virtual teaching practices part 2 on Thursday with Nicole Piper. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care of yourselves. Do some yoga, go for a walk, get some breathing in, and get some sleep. And we will see you all next time. Thank you. And thank you, Anna.